talk us through, within the context of fashion and FCMG, the best ways of identifying the best social media channel for your brand or business.
Okay, so there's no real right or wrong answer to what channel you should be on. Really, brands should have a presence on all the channels, but probably want to focus on the one channel that they get the most response from. Now, within fashion, that's probably going to be Instagram. The kind of nature of Instagram is obviously graphic and visual, so brands can put out posts with pictures of their products in them, worn by beautiful people, and doing aspirational things, and really kind of build a picture that people want to aspire to be. So it lends itself really well for fashion, whereas the likes of Facebook and Twitter can also do that, but they tend to be a bit more conversational. So you'll get a bit more anecdotal feedback from your customers on Facebook and might learn more about them in that respect. Whereas on Instagram, you'll probably sell more and get great kind of likes and a bit of feedback, but not as much as you might get on
So
Facebook.
you're saying focus on one channel, but use all channels?
Absolutely, yeah. Use all channels, but focus on the one that brings you the most, where your audience is going to be.
And can you talk us through about what each channel should be used for? You've obviously spoke about Instagram for fashion, but presumably Twitter and all the other...
Yeah, absolutely. The other channels tend to be a bit more conversational, so people will converse with other people that are interested in the products, other people that are looking at products and brands as well. And like I say, they're a bit more anecdotal, so you can learn more about what people really think rather than just likes and that sort of stuff.
Some customers favour some channels for complaints over others, or...?
Well, the more wordy channels like your Twitters and your Facebooks, they will be where customers tend to go to complain. They're seen as a bit more public, so people will go there to talk about their experiences more than they would on Instagram. It does happen on Instagram, but it tends to be a bit more focused towards your kind of Facebooks and your Twitters.
And are there any other social media channels coming up through the ranks that we should keep an eye on? TikTok, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. TikTok, the kind of video version of Instagram almost. It's massive in the Far East and it's moving this way. They're spending a lot of money on advertising on Facebook and other channels, so it's really one to look out for. Get your presence on there early, get your kind of TikTok handles early before anyone else has picked them up. Before it gets massive, you might already be too late, but get on there as quickly as you can. Test the waters on it, see what sort of responses you're getting. It might be the one that works for you, so yeah, absolutely.
So finally, with regards to selecting the best channel, can you just sum up those few points? So
absolutely.
Focus on one.
Just go where your audience is, essentially. If your audience is on Instagram and that's how they like to be communicated to, focus on Instagram. If it's Facebook, focus on Facebook. Your audience should dictate where you go. Your audience is the key part of any social media campaign, any social media channel. That's what you need to focus on and define your audience. So if your audience is a younger person, you probably want to be on Instagram. If it's a slightly older person, you probably want to be on Facebook or perhaps Twitter.
Martin, how much should a brand spend on paid social media?
That's really dependent on the brand and the goal. A lot of brands just want to do social media because everyone's doing it. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. Really, you want to know how much your click-through rates and your conversion rates from your website are, and if they're optimized first before you look at how much you want to spend in order to achieve a goal. If you're trying to sell 1,000 t-shirts without knowing what your click-through rates and your conversion rates are, you're not going to know how much you need to spend in order to do that.
You mentioned goals. What are the normal goals most retailers will use pay for social for?
Well, that really depends on what they want to do. So like I said, you might have 1,000 t-shirts sitting in the warehouse that you need to get rid of. You might want to do a paid social campaign to get those out. You might want to increase your following, just run a branding campaign in that respect. There's various different goals that you potentially could have, but really you want to consider how much you're putting into it and what what success looks like. The Facebook pixel is a little bit of code you can put on your website, which will allow you to target people that have been through your website, through their Facebook accounts, which is really powerful because they're interested in your brand. They might not follow you, but they're interested in your brand. They've been to your website, but they might not have followed you on Facebook or Instagram. So you could do campaigns targeted specifically at people that had been on your website in the last 2 weeks, for instance. And you'll get much higher response from that generally than you would from just a blanket campaign to lots of different people.
And should the person in charge of paid for social also be aware of margins, profit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're looking at your return on investment and you are spending £1,000 on social, you need to know how much you need to sell in order to make that £1,000 back. So you need to be able to calculate your ROI based on your profit rather than just how much money you're bringing in terms of turnover.
Should your brand focus on influencers or paid for social?
That's another one that's kind of whatever's right for your brand is what you should do. Some brands will focus more on influencers, but it's about choosing the right influencer for your brand. One influencer might have twice the following of another, but they might not be necessarily aligned to your audience. So getting the right influencer is as key as targeting the right audience on a paid social campaign. So to answer your question, it goes back to that goal. What's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? And will the influencer really give you what you want? And if the influencer isn't going to give you what you want, is the paid social campaign going to give you more than what you want? Now, that's not to say you can't do both together. Get an influencer in, get them to create your content with you so you're investing in that content, and then push it out further with a paid social campaign.
So could you just do an influencer campaign or just a paid for campaign?
Absolutely, yeah. You can do one or the other, but it kind of makes sense that if you're investing in an influencer, why would you not invest a little bit more and push it out further with a paid social campaign? So the influencer's audience will push it further, but if you then were to put on a paid social campaign on top of that, it would get it even further. And if you've picked the right audience for your paid social campaign and the right influencer, it should spread further, and then the organic spread on the back of that will be bigger as well.
And what would the normal returns be on either? So what would your normal returns expected to be from a paid for campaign v an influencer campaign?
You can't really have an expected return. It's goal based. So you can go out and say, I want to shift 1,000 t-shirts, and your expected return on that, if you've got everything right, would be to shift 1,000 t-shirts. If your goal is to increase your following by 10,000, then that's what your expected return would be.
So is one avenue more about building the brand over the other, or is one about selling? Can you talk a little bit?
Not necessarily. It depends on the influencer you choose and the campaign you choose and the audience you choose, and it's down to your goal. So you need to select wisely. I can't tell you that there's going to be getting an influencer will sell you more than doing a paid campaign. I can't tell you that using an influencer will get you more followers than a paid campaign.
How much of your marketing budget should be attributed to social?
Well, that's a bit of a contentious issue in the industry. A lot of experts will tell you most people spend 10 to 15% of their budget on social, but that probably takes into account most large brands who have got a big marketing budget and spend quite a bit on social. Whereas a small startup or SME who doesn't really invest a lot of money in branding and paid search and other digital channels, they might spend 40% plus of their budget on social because they get really good results from it. They've got a really niche following who really love their brand, and they can put some content out and make decent sales off the back of it. But the 10 to 15% is probably based mainly around larger brands and their overall budget. But that figure is going to increase over the next 5 to 10 years. I think the next 5 years, social spending is expected to go up by about 75%. That's not necessarily focused particularly on what the people are spending on now. You've got innovations in the space like conversational commerce, which is getting much bigger, where you can use chatbots to kind of help you convert off the back of your social ads. There's going to be a lot of investment on that in the next few years. That will help to increase conversion rates, increase engagement, and quite cheaply as well. But it needs some investment in that off the back of it as well.
So you see social media budgets becoming bigger in the future? Or?
Absolutely, yeah. So the conversational commerce thing is essentially going to be mostly a social-based activity, a social media-based activity, using the social media messengers. I mean, Instagram's due to launch a messenger in 2020, I believe. And once that comes in, you'll notice kind of click to chat off the back of social media ads being a big thing as well. And it'll really help to build that kind of back end or follow up from the ad.
So just to sum up then, in terms of how much you should be spending your marketing budget on social, can you just sum up your key points?
Yeah, whatever's right for your brand. If you're a small startup who's got really good expertise in social, spend more of your budget on social. If you're shifting a lot of stuff through social media ads and through using social media, keep doing it. If you're doing a lot of paid search and getting results on that, spend a bit less on social. It's really down to what's right for you. There's no kind of one-size-fits-all approach to marketing. You can't say, right, to be a success, I need to spend 15% of my budget on social and 40% on paid search. It just needs to be what's right for you and what works for you, and pulling those levers to kind of change a bit of budget here and a bit of budget there to fix what's working for you at the time. That's what you need to do.
Who's doing it well at the moment from both a fashion and non-fashion point of view?
From a fashion point of view, you've got Gymshark are doing things really well. They've got their social channels are rife with engagement, followers, people talking to them. Their content is absolutely targeted to their followers, and their followers engage with it massively. I mean, they've grown hugely. I think they've only been around a few years. And if you go into a gym, well, any time in the last 12 months or so, you've almost certainly seen a Gymshark logo. And people love the brand. People post themselves in Gymshark clothes, hashtagging Gymsharking, tagging them in the posts. They've just seem to have their social media marketing down to a T completely. From a non-fashion point of view, Paddy Power are brilliant. They've got this irreverent, laddie humour that just hits the spot with their audience. They go after the kind of recreational better, and they get huge amounts of returning customers off the back of it. Their posts go viral. It's part of their marketing campaign as a whole to be that kind of irreverent, slightly offensive but not too offensive kind of mates down the pub having a chat kind of tone of voice, and it really resonates with their audience, and they absolutely love them. And they're getting some great results on social as well. Posting too often, people that are posting kind of 15, 16 times a week tend to see a big drop off in engagement because they're just too active. People aren't interested in hearing from brands 15, 16 times a week. The optimal range is probably somewhere between 2 and 7 times a week. Once a day is probably still a bit much, so I always recommend 4 to 5 times a week is probably the optimal amount of times to post. And make sure you keep in what you're posting, what your audience wants to hear and what your audience is interested in. Don't just post for the sake of posting because you need to post 5 times a week. Don't post if you've got nothing to say. Don't try and sell with all of your messages. People don't come to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter to hear about you. They come to hear about things they're interested in. People will buy something that they see other people enjoying. They won't buy because you tell them to buy. not having a social strategy. So your social strategy is going to make up everything you do on social media, from how you sound to what your audience looks like to kind of how much you're posting. So if you've got 3 or 4 people running your social media accounts, you want them to sound like your brand. Without a strategy, you might have one person on Monday saying something in a completely different way to someone on Tuesday or Wednesday. You get no kind of standardization, and people don't really then engage with your brand as much because you're not talking in the way that the audience wants, you're talking in a way that the person that's running the social media account wants. Hashtags. People think hashtags are cool, so they'll hashtag everything with everything that they think is remotely interesting to the brand or remotely related to the brand. The amount of times I see people in Manchester running events use the hashtag Manchester. If you look at the hashtag of Manchester, it's generally people looking at the great buildings you've got in Manchester, not people that are interested in an event on business services. The likes of Instagram, they say to use, well, you're allowed to use up to 30 hashtags, but you use 30 hashtags, it just looks like spam and people just not interested in it. You should really think about what a hashtag is, and it's a reference point. It's something that people follow and they get updates on. So if you're a Manchester-based event, then don't tag Manchester, tag Manchester Business Services or something like that that's really relevant to what you're trying to do. The cardinal sin of social media is not responding to your followers. People don't come to social media to just absorb what you're saying. They come there to engage with you and expect the same in return. It's a two-way street. If you don't respond to your audience and engage with them, they won't engage with you, and therefore you'll just end up with an audience of disengaged people. Your posts won't go far, and it'll just be damaging to your brand on social media.